Tonight I had the opportunity to go see M3GAN, the new horror comedy movie from superstar horror producers James Wan and Jason Blum. M3GAN is about an AI doll designed by a roboticist named Gemma, played by Allison Williams, who designs M3GAN to help her niece Katie, who recently lost her parents. The only thing is, some strange occurrences start happening that leads Gemma to believe that maybe M3GAN isn't the warm caregiver that she designed her to be. And look guys, I know the trailer looks weird. I was on the fence on whether or not I even wanted to go see this movie, but I started hearing some positive buzz about it that led me to believe that it was going to lean more on its comedy elements versus a gory horror movie that we've seen a million times. And we've seen people go with the premise of an AI doll that becomes sentient and starts killing people. We've seen that multiple times, so it was nice to know that this movie was going to give us something different and try to lean more so on the comedy elements. And what I heard about this beforehand is 1000% true. This movie is an absolute riot. Yeah, there's violence in it, obviously. It's a movie about a doll that becomes sentient, and I mean, have you seen that thing? Super creepy. But the violence never pushes the movie past its tone. This film knows what it's going for as a fun, campy movie about a doll that just so happens to kill people. And what makes this film work, first and foremost, is the character M3GAN. This movie has no legs to stand on if it can't sell us the character of M3GAN and what she's supposed to be in service of the movie. And that is a horror antagonist that plays it completely straight in a very absurd plot. She is dead serious the entire movie, and there is no doubt about what her purpose in her life, I guess, is. And that is to protect Katie at all costs, regardless if it means other people have to die. She knows how to communicate with Katie as well as the adults, such that they don't necessarily can catch on to what it is that she's doing, but they know that something's up. It's funny because the designer of M3GAN, the main character of the movie, she's familiar with M3GAN's design. She knows what she isn't capable of, so it makes it even funnier whenever M3GAN does or says something that isn't in her coding, and you just see the confusion on Allison Williams' face, like, where did that come from, sort of a thing. The character design is also very freaky. It's really leaning into the uncanny valley. You know, the feeling whenever we see a robot in real life and we're like, that looks kind of like a human, but not entirely, like there's something up there. It really leans into those elements so that M3GAN, while looking from a distance as a little girl, there are multiple characters throughout the movie that think that she's just a little girl if they don't get up close to her. They make her just realistic looking enough to pull that off, but if you were to actually stand maybe this distance from M3GAN, you would realize that she is definitely not human. And I mentioned it before, but they really lean into that whole uncanny valley element with M3GAN's personality as well, not just her looks. She starts to develop a bit of a personality throughout the movie, and it just makes it even more creepy because it's not entirely lining up with how a human would act, but it's perfect for the character. I thought it was really smart that they did that. They do a good job of explaining about why M3GAN is so indestructible and why just no humans in this movie stand a chance against her one-on-one. So she's a really menacing character, but also, like, they pointed out in the movie, she's a 4-foot tall doll. Like, she shouldn't be able to kill these people or beat people up, but nonetheless she is, and that just makes it even more absurd. So I love that the movie was self-aware in that way. It's also interesting to see what M3GAN can see from her point of view. There are multiple times throughout the movie where we see what M3GAN sees, and she's sort of analyzing how each person is feeling based on their facial expressions. We see whenever she initially boots up for the first time, her recognizing facial patterns on Katie's face. It's really interesting to see it develop. I liked that a lot. This movie wasn't going to work if M3GAN didn't, and she absolutely did. Everything between the character design, the dialogue she had throughout the movie, how they kind of showed us her technology, but also we aren't fully sure what she's capable of. They leave a lot of room in there to discover what M3GAN's full capabilities are in maybe a sequel. I'm not going to say too much about how this film leaves off, but it definitely leaves room here to come back to the story, and who knows, maybe we're looking at the next horror icon here with M3GAN. The tone of this movie was exactly what it needed to be, in my opinion. It never took itself too seriously. And yeah, there's violence in this movie. It's a horror film. I mean, what are you going to expect? But the violence never got to a point where I felt like it took away from the tone that they set up here. Like, this is first and foremost a comedy, in my opinion. It's a comedy that's also a horror movie, but the horror elements, like, there's not blood splashing up on the screen that makes you, like, kind of sit back in your seat like, oh, what did I just watch? It's never anything like that. There is some imagery here that is kind of disturbing, if you want to say. It's very goofy, but still, it never reached a point where I was like, oh, that was kind of out of left field for this movie. Everything seemed to line up between the violence with the tone that they set up for it being more of a comedy. And then I actually really like the underlying themes that they explore in this movie. I wasn't expecting a really deep plot, but the movie actually has a lot to say about technology kind of becoming a co-parent for this generation of kids. You know, just how easy it is to hand your kid an iPad or to put a TV in front of their face just so they would shut up and leave you alone and let you do your work. The movie has a lot to say about that, obviously, with the character of M3GAN coming into the fold here. Allison Williams is someone who's really dedicated to her work. All in all, she kind of wants Katie out of her hair, and M3GAN provides an escape for Katie, and that's just good enough until it isn't. And it also has a lot to say about being there for family whenever someone's going through a tough time, and how it's easy to kind of brush that person aside and not help them whenever they are clearly in pain or, you know, literally crying alone in their room and you can hear them, but you don't go help them. It says a lot about that and just confronting those head on before things get out of hand, or, you know, until a doll starts murdering everybody. Hopefully it doesn't come to that for most of you guys, but I actually was pretty impressed with some of the themes that they explored in the film. I also like seeing Allison Williams here as well. Her character is hard to jump on board with, but that's sort of the point. They present her to be a very analytical person, someone who's really dedicated to her work, but I felt like that's not an excuse for someone to be unapathetic, which Gemma very much is for part of the movie. I mean, just because someone works with robots doesn't mean that they can't feel bad for their niece who just lost both of their parents, one of which was your sister. So I didn't really like that with her character. I get that part of the journey is, you know, she develops, she starts to care about Katie, all that good stuff. But I mean, at the very beginning, it's like, I don't know, she's a little bit too robotic of a person in that situation. I also feel like the movie didn't really do a very good job of selling me on her relationship to her sister, as well as why she would even want to keep Katie around. Because she's obviously obsessed with her work. She has to jump through hoops to keep Katie happy. They don't have a fantastic relationship, and they don't really do much to address why she would want Katie around. I mean, there's a clear out in the movie for Katie to go live with other relatives, but Gemma doesn't want her to go do that. And all that we really get as a reason is Gemma looks at a picture of her sister kind of longingly, and whenever it's proposed that Katie go live with other family, Gemma's argument is, no, my sister wanted me to have her. Well, yeah, that should be enough, but we didn't get enough time establishing that you were very close with your sister. There's, I think, one line where someone asks if Gemma was close to Katie's mother, and Gemma's like, yeah, it's not like overwhelming. We don't get any flashbacks or anything to them as kids or whatever. But nonetheless, I like Allison Williams as a performer in the movie. We also get Violet McGraw, who I am very familiar with from The Haunting of Hill House, my favorite miniseries of all time. She does a good job at portraying how a kid would behave if a tragic event such as both of your parents dying happened and you had no one really there to comfort you. She plays Katie as being angry, confused, and ultimately attached to M3GAN, who is the only life form that really seems to care about her throughout the entire movie. Now, that love and care goes to a dangerous level, but that's beside the point. You can understand why Katie gets attached to M3GAN, and the movie even provides an explanation as to why exactly that would happen, which I thought was smart of them as well. Then other things that I wanted to talk about with this movie, it suffers from what a lot of movies do, where the main character is designing this project, it's taking them so long, they just can't make the final push, and then something happens and they're like, oh yeah, we're just gonna complete this scientific masterpiece in like a week or so. That scientific masterpiece being M3GAN. I mean, it seems like in the beginning of the movie, they can't quite get M3GAN to work correctly, but then, you know, Katie comes in and she's all sad, so Gemma just decides to finish M3GAN for her niece. I don't know. They really brushed by it. I can't fault the movie too much because it gets us where we need to go. The movie is very well paced. It doesn't drag on for too long, so I get that we didn't want to spend too much time with, getting all the details in line for how M3GAN was made. We don't really need to see that, but it still was very, very convenient. I realize the commercials are freaky, but that's exactly the joke. The movie is very aware and uses it to its advantage. I'd recommend going to see it with a group of friends or just in a theater full of people if you have no one else to go with. What a fun way to kick off 2023. I'd imagine we'll get a sequel for this. This movie wasn't relatively a high budget film, so I bet that they can crank out another one in time for January 2025 or maybe even later next year, who knows. But if you're looking for a fun time at the movie theater, a little bit of violence, but really just a whole lot of comedy, this is definitely the movie for you. But that's all that I gotta say about M3GAN. Thank you guys so much for watching the video up to this point. Be sure to subscribe if you aren't already, if you like this and you want to see more, and I'll see you next time.